Hey guys, let's get straight to the point. IR pollution is the most obvious when you're filming outdoor under bright sunlight and when you are using a strong ND filter to cut down light coming into the lens. The darkest part of the image, especially black clothes, will show a reddish magenta tint. The whole image is actually affected, but the darkest part of the image is the most obvious. So if you film a lot of outdoor things when using a strong ND filter, let's say anything higher than 5 stops, an IR cut filter should help. By the way, this is not a scientific test, but a more practical test when using strong ND filter to film during daytime. I'm just going to show you how effective an IR cut filter is, basically a before and after image. Also, I don't have any tungsten lights at home to do the same test, but I read that tungsten lights will also produce IR pollution. I will do an update video if I ever need to film under tungsten lights. The easiest way to test if you need an IR cut filter is to try filming using a strong ND filter. If a black shirt or cloth turns magenta, then most likely an IR cut filter will help. A lot of mirrorless cameras have built in IR cut filter nowadays, but it might still not be strong enough, so it really depends. So do the test to find out if you need the IR cut filter. Alright, so now I'm going to show you a whole bunch of images, basically before and after using the IR cut filter, and I was filming with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, BMPCC4K. It is well known to be affected by IR pollutions, so let's jump straight into it. The first section of images is basically B-raw images that I just did a basic color space transform in DaVinci Resolve, added some contrast, saturation, fixed the exposure, basically no alteration whatsoever to the colors itself. So this is basically just straight out of camera. So the first image that you are looking at, this is filming with no IR cut filter and no UV filter, stopping down the lens to like T22 in order to have a proper exposure. And you can actually already see some IR pollution in my shirt. This is supposed to be a black shirt, and from looking at here, I can see that there's a little bit of a magenta tint already without using any ND filter. So I think that the UV effect is really strong, probably because it was a super bright sunny day. It was like 30 degrees and I was like looking straight into the sun, and that's kind of dumb of me. But anyway, the UV pollution or IR pollution is really strong that it is affecting my shirt without using any UV filter at all. This is without any filters. All right, so the next image that I'm going to show you guys is with just the IR cut filter from ICE or ICE, straight onto the lens, no UV filter yet, to show you guys that it is actually helping even when there is no UV filter used. So there you go. This is before the IR cut filter. This is after. Before, after, before, after. You can kind of tell that it is already helping to make my shirt look more natural black instead of having that magenta tint as before. This is before. You can tell that there is a magenta tint, like a pretty strong one without even using any UV, not UV, sorry, any ND filter yet. This is after with just the IR cut filter. So it is helping already. And if you pay attention at the trees at the back, the trees are actually a little bit more true to life. It's greener with the IR cut filter. This is with the filter, the IR cut filter. This is without. The trees are greener, which is a little bit more natural than this like weird yellow magenta tint trees. So it is helping the overall image quality, and that is with just the IR cut filter. The second image was also filmed with the BMPCC4K in B-RAW with the variable ND filter, a 5-stop variable ND filter from ProLipro, and that is without IR cut filter yet. So there you go. This is with the ProLipro filter without the IR cut filter. For some reason, the ProLipro filter that we're using, it's a really expensive one too. It's like $300 almost, and it is casting a green tint onto the image. This is with the ND filter with the PolarPro ND. This is without the variable ND. I don't know why there's like a green cast on it, but to us, I think they're trying to counter that magenta tint with air pollution or that comes with like air pollution. So they added a green tint to it, but I think this is really strong for some reason. Anyway, this is with the variable ND from PolarPro without air cut filter. And now we're going to add the air cut filter. So pay attention again on my shirt area. And after that, you can look at the trees. This is without the air cut filter, but just the UV without the air cut, with the air cut, without air cut, with the air cut. You can tell that it is not as obvious, but what is interesting is the air cut filter actually helped removing the green cast for some reason. If you pay attention at my shirt and the table area here, you can tell that it is removing the green tint by the PolarPro filter. For some reason, it's the air cut filter is helping to remove that as well, so which is really good. So this is after the air cut filter. This is before. You can see that there's a really obvious green tint on everything. But after applying the air cut filter, even the table clears out. And of course, as we mentioned before, the trees are going to be a little bit nicer, more defined with the air cut filter. This is without, this is with. So everything seems better, more natural with the air cut filter. That's why we think using an air cut filter is going to help no matter how strong of an ND you're using. But of course, we're going to show you an image that is going to be even more obvious with and without the air cut filter when you're using even stronger ND. So let's jump straight into it. Okay, this image right here, sorry that I am not filming myself because this is the next day and my stronger variable ND filter that is around like 8 stops max is actually smaller than our IR cut filter. So I have to kind of hand hold the IR cut filter so I cannot film myself. But anyway, I put my black shirt on the table. This is without any filter. You can see that as we mentioned before, there's a magenta tint on the shirt, pretty obvious, without any filter, no variable ND. And the IR cut filter is actually going to help. We're going to jump to the next image and you can focus on the shirt. This is after using the IR cut filter. This is before. The magenta tint is on the shirt. This is after using the IR cut filter and the magenta tint is gone. So again, without ND filters, you should still try to use the IR cut filter, at least on this camera. Again, test it on your own camera and see if you need it. Use a strong ND and see if there's any magenta tint. Or no ND, you can try to see if you can see any magenta tint on any black cloth. And the next image is with a 8-stop-ish kind of variable ND filter without the IR cut filter. Sorry about the haze. I don't know what happened, but it was filming at the same angle and the now we know that our variable ND filter actually casts a haze. Anyway, we try to balance the image by adding in a little bit more contrast. You can see that the shirt is quite magenta here, not as strong as other people when they're filming with the BMPCC4K on YouTube. A lot of people actually shown a really strong magenta tint on their shirt, or even like pink purplish. But anyway, this is quite strong already. If you try to fix this in post, you are going to ruin other part of the image if you add in some green into it. So try not to do that. Use an IR cut filter. This is with the strong ND filter around 8 stop, and we're going to apply the IR cut filter. This is after. You can see that the magenta tint is completely gone. And this is before. This is after. Before and after. That's why we highly recommend using an IR cut filter if you're in situations like this a lot of the time. Let's say if you're filming outdoor a lot and you use a lot of strong ND filter, you should be able to notice the air pollution already if you do that a lot. So this is probably the easiest and the most convenient and most efficient way to get rid of air pollution if it happens on your camera. On Blackmagic design cameras for whatever reason, I don't even think they have an IR filter in the camera itself. But a lot of mirrorless cameras nowadays, let's say Sony or Canon, most likely they have an IR cut filter already, but it might not be strong enough. So take a look at your camera, try to throw on a strong ND, film some cloth that is black under the sun, and see if you see that magenta tint. If you see that, you might want to get the IR cut filter. A budget IR cut filter is actually not that expensive. The ICE IR cut filter that we're using, it's only around $45 and it is already helping a lot. So the time that I'm saving correcting the image should be worth more than the IR cut filter itself. So that's why we should use the IR cut filter instead of fixing the image in post. So when do you know if you do not need an IR cut filter? And that's pretty obvious now, I'm pretty sure. If you do not use strong ND filters to film during daytime, or if you do not film in an environment filled with like tungsten lights all the time, I would say you don't really need an IR cut filter because there is not much IR pollution that it's going to sip in by having a strong ND, because you don't use a strong ND that often. And if you don't film under tungsten lights, then there's not much point of getting an IR cut filter. But it is always better to have the tool when you need it, because you don't want to show up on a set filming for a client with a whole bunch of footage with IR pollution, realizing that like you don't have the IR cut filter, because the IR cut filter is the cheapest one. The budget one is only around like $45. So I would say keep it in your kit, and when you need it, then you can use it. But if you don't need it, that's great. If you need it, then it will save your project. By the way, I do not notice any obvious decrease in light coming into the lens or weird color cast when using the ICE IR cut filter or ICE IR cut filter. So you don't really have to worry about that part if that's what you're wondering, because a lot of people would say like, oh, if you add a glass in front of your lens, then there is going to be a chance that it will cut down the light. But the IR cut filter is actually pretty clear. To be honest with you, I don't even know how they do it, but it looks pretty clear, and it has a little bit of like a purple tint on the filter itself to counterbalance that IR pollution. So I don't know how they did it, but don't worry, it's not going to cut down that amount of light too significantly. I don't really see it at all, actually. Like if you look at these images, this is before applying the IR cut filter, and this is after. I don't really see any change of light almost. And by the way, I added the same color space transform and also everything same, exposure, contrast, saturation, all the same to these images. So it's a straight back-to-back kind of recording. It's like, I don't know, like 10 seconds apart from each other. So you don't really have to worry about like the amount of light changing, and it's like super bright and sunny day with no clouds at all. So you don't have to worry about that part that much. But to me, there's no obvious color cast or decrease in light. That's it. I think using a $45 IR cut filter to help fixing the image when filming is definitely worth it. Again, it is about getting the look in camera and the time we can save fixing the image in post. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Are you using an IR cut filter when you're filming? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.